continue to let folks in. My name is Elaine Johnson. I'm the president of the NAACP, and it's good to be here this afternoon and to be in great company with our speakers tonight, Dr. Childs and Maria Gitin, who are two of my personal confidants and people I lean into when the winds of the world seems to be a bit much. And I need people to lean into for a listening ear or a hug or just some clarification. So I know we're in for a treat tonight. And so I'm just going to share brief bios about them, and then we're going to jump right in because I don't know about y'all, but I've been waiting for this for a minute now, as the world's been feeling a little bit heavy. And so I'll start with Maria. And for those of you who don't know her, Maria is the author of This Bright Light of Ours, Stories from the Voting Rights Fight, University of Alabama Press, based on her experience as a teenage civil rights field worker in Alabama. Maria has continued to work for racial justice and to register voters in diverse communities for more than 5 decades. She's a frequent presenter on civil rights and voting rights. And see, that's why I have her here today. Maria has been the Martin Luther King Jr. Day keynote speaker for King County in Seattle, for the U.S. Army Defense Language Institute at the Presidio of Monterey, and for the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute at Stanford. She curated of an art and history exhibit, Vote, Your Voice is Your Vote, at Pajaro Valley Arts and at the Santa Cruz County Government Center from 2018 to 2020. Maria has received numerous racial justice awards and commendations, including from the YWCA, the NAACP, State of California Assembly, Alabama House of Representatives, and Defense Language Institute and the U.S. Congress. Let's give a warm welcome for Maria, and then I'll introduce John.
Thank you.
Who's another amazing civil rights leader. Dr. Childs is Distinguished Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He was born on December 2nd, 1942, in a public housing project in the Roxbury section of Boston. In 1963, he organized a group of students from the University of Massachusetts going to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where MLK delivered his famous I Had a Dream speech. In 1965, he took part of the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama, as a member of Friends of SNCE, the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee. As a volunteer with the Prison Education Project of the community organization Barrios Unidos, he has spent the last 20 years doing volunteer teaching and speaking on peacemaking and transcommunal cooperation in Soledad Correctional Training Facility, where he works with multi-ethnic communities. He works with UCSC's John R. Lewis College and coordinated a combined university Soledad transcommunal peacemaking and cooperation class, with which UCSC students participate inside the prison with diverse incarcerated men who are also students taking the course, which is really exciting. And I've had the opportunity to talk with John about this. All participating students receive University of California course credits for this class. So you'll get to know a little bit more about John and Maria as they start to talk this evening. And before I have a list of questions that I have asked John and Maria to respond to, but before we get into that, I invite John or Maria to just share a little foundation of actually why we're here today, of the decision from the Supreme Court of United States and their decision to try to gut the Voting Rights Act, and then we'll lean into the questions. So I'll turn it over to you, Maria or John.
John?
Maria, why don't you go first, please?
No, you go first.
You go first.
You're older, John, and you have an advanced degree.
I am. Well, okay, I am older. Okay, I'll give you that. Well, I did write out some comments. If you don't mind, I'll just read a little bit of what I wrote, just to start with, by way of responding to what Elaine just brought up. I'd like to just quote from the Center for American Progress, a statement they made on 6 May this month. Um, they say that Justice Alito's deciding opinion in the Calais case, quote, makes it incredibly difficult for voters of color to bring Voting Rights Act claims when states engage in racial gerrymandering. Specifically, Justice Alito heightened the burden on plaintiffs looking to bring gerrymandering claims, requiring them to, among other things, prove intentional discrimination, a very high bar to meet, end quote. So that's really part of the crux of the issue, which is, getting inside someone's head to prove that they are racist and in a legal sense, and that their political decisions have been done out of racial animus is not easy. It's not easy, and this is what makes that decision so uh, uh, pernicious. The other aspect of it is that it has been rushed into uh, uh, action, therefore going against what the Center for American Progress calls the bedrock Purcell principle, which, excuse me, for quote, for 2 decades, federal courts across the country and the Supreme Court have adhered to Purcell, which holds that courts should decline to implement last-minute changes to elections as a means of avoiding voter confusion. Similarly, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, in her dissent, said in part, quote, there is also the so-called Purcell principle, which we, the Supreme Court, invoked only 5 months ago to chide a federal district court for improperly inserting itself into an active primary campaign. So Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama have, despite Purcell, now carried out with redrawing of their voting maps. The Virginia State Court just rejected the voting map that the voters had put in place. And that, to go back to Elaine's question, all the above leads to the question of what is to be done and what are we to do in a practical way. So let me just stop there. For me, that's part of the crux of the issue. Uh,
Mhm.
so I'm going to stop there. I get some more, but
Yeah.
Elaine, may I say that John and I actually each prepared a presentation. And I know John has some really good things in his. I would love to hear him, I think he will answer. What we did was we embedded the questions that you sent us into. So is it all right if we proceed in that format? Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay,
okay.
John, why don't you go back to your,
Okay.
because
This won't take too
he
long. I
is
mean,
a
I didn't write all
professor
that.
and he prepared a presentation there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maria said he's a professor. He wants to write a lot. No, but this won't take long. Um, The New York Times in 9 May reports that because of recent events, Democratic lawmakers in New York and Colorado, quote, have already signaled a desire to redraw their maps before the 2028 elections, and Virginia Democrats are likely to be in a similar position. Uh, Meanwhile, in Tennessee, black voters are filing a lawsuit based on the Purcell principle, as the Times says, that discourages changes to voting rules and procedures in elections. So there is already pushback, and it's I think one of the challenges we face is that there are different forms of pushback in different parts of the country depending on how this is playing out. So I suggest that any support that can be offered to pro-democracy efforts such as those going on in New York, Tennessee, Alabama, is will emerge in a variety of forms. So that requires us to be very flexible about how we support what's going on. It's a Supreme Court decision. This is a complex legal political struggle. So the help and guidance of people like Eric Holder, Obama's former Attorney General, and many other pro-democracy legal experts is needed. Finally, must say, I have a certain type of hope and optimism in drawing and thinking about this. And I want to draw on three quotations that help keep me going.
Mm,
The first is, of course, Keep Hope Alive
mm,
from the great Reverend Jesse Jackson. The second is from the Irish poet Seamus Heaney, who says, "Hope is not optimism, which expects things to turn out well,
Mm,
but is something rooted in the conviction that there is a good worth working for."
mm,
And this, we are in the midst of needing that good to work for.
mhm,
And finally, there's Ella Baker, the great founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, speaking at the Institute of the Black World in Atlanta in 1969, who said, quote, "I think the big question is, what is American society? Is it the kind of society that permits people to grow and develop their capacity, that gives them a sense of value, not only for
mm.
themselves, but for other human beings? I think there is a great question as to whether we can become that kind of society." End quote. As at 33, 83 years, 33, yeah, don't I wish. At 83 years of age, I look back on my involvement, pro-democracy activism, from the March on Washington up through working in Soledad, etc., um, with my emphasis on transcommunal, that's say multi-group approaches to peace and cooperation. And I have to say, I've seen both heavy defeats and I've seen victories. When I think about the March on Washington, for example, I think about the fact that as great a moment as that was, and it still is, of course, it was sandwiched in between the assassination of Medgar Evers and the bombing afterwards of the church in Birmingham. So it was a moment of victory, if you will, uh, but it was bookended by terrible defeats, and because the people who were doing those bombings, of course, got away with it at that time because they were part of a totalitarian system of state control. It was state terror. But most importantly for me, I think that today we have a much thicker foundation of pro-democracy activism and consciousness than was available in the 1960s, that has grown out of the many previous movements. There's a wider diversity of pro-democracy goals, organizations, and worldviews, from making a safer and natural environment to protecting voting rights and beyond. This means that different people will have differently arranged agendas, all pro-democracy, but all different in one way or another. We must accept this diversity, I suggest, and offer to help one another across agendas. When there is what I call constructive disagreement, from which we can respectfully learn about one another, let us recognize our differences. Real, not just cosmetic diversity means real disagreement on some issues, while and yet at the same time we can agree on others. Sometimes disputes cannot be resolved. But then we should maintain our linkages and move on to what can be resolved by working together, holding on to a positive, courageously compassionate spirit in order to make a truly democratic society, as Ella Baker described it. I have seen that success of people working together who had previously been in hostile situations in Soledad prison. If they can do it there, then it can be done in the wider society. So I, one of our experiences, I think Maria probably encountered this as well. It's in the movements of the 60s, early 70s, was a certain tendency toward schisms and breakdown as one group disagreed with another group. I think we have to avoid, not only avoid that, but I think we have the resources available to do more than what we could have done, what we did in the 60s. Let me just give you one specific example. I was doing some work with Heather Rogers at the Public Defenders Association. She asked me to speak to a National Association of Public Defenders, a Zoom conference, a couple of years ago. So I spoke with them and I asked when their organization had been founded. And they said something, I can't remember the exact date, but it was something like 1989. Now, in other words, they did not exist in 1960. There was no National Association of Public Defenders. And there's thousands of organizations like that today that have come out of the work of people in the 60s and 70s, American Indian movement, farm workers, civil rights, women's movement, etc. So as dire as our situation is, and it's a dire situation, and it's a terrible situation, and it is one that can be very depressing, we also have a foundation of resources in the form of organizations, ways of thinking, and if we can work together without trying to jam each other down into one agenda, but rather accept multiple agendas and make cross links amongst them, I think we will be in a position, especially in this very complicated time, to do what Seamus Heaney was talking about when he said, uh, hope is not optimism, which expects things to turn out well. It's something rooted in the conviction that there is a good worth working for. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comments will be more brief. And I am going to just basically briefly, my background has been covered, so I guess my viewpoint, and then I do want to specifically talk about Alabama because it's so dear to my heart. Some of my closest friends that are like family to me live there. But um, like John, I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. Um, the poet Wendell Berry says, "Be hopeful, even though you have considered the facts." Um, we also sang "Keep Your Eyes on the Prize" during the movement, and
Yeah.
I do feel that that is something that is sorely missing in today's movements. I know that some local people have brought back having the Peace Choir and other groups singing during demonstrations, that keeping spirits up is about attracting people to a movement, not telling them what they're doing wrong. And as John so aptly pointed out, there's the divergence of strategies, even between North and South. I was just really touched by Indivisible South County that listened to my and other people's pleas to not call for a general strike, because in South County, everybody there needs to work every day. And it was going to hurt small people and small business owners, most of whom are Latino. And so they didn't call for a strike. I mean, they listened to people who said, look at the implications of this. Strikes may work in large cities, but in an area where we have no large employers, particularly in that region in the Pajaro Valley. So I know those things can be done. I am, of course, deeply involved and have been since I was an 18-year-old. And John and I, we were both in Alabama in 1965, him with SNCC and me with SCLC. Our paths did not cross, but that common experience does transcend other identities. As John mentioned, it's kind of still dawning on me that that basically any kind of protection that we had under the Voting Rights Act is completely and totally destroyed at this point. So only political considerations, how many Democrats, how many Republicans, how many independents can be considered in redistricting. Nothing to do with race can be considered. And Janae Nelson, who's the president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, said yesterday, "We are now on a fast track to go backwards and have a white, male dominated leadership structure in this country." In 1980, there was only one Black woman serving in the House and none in the Senate. Today, thanks to the VRA, there are 48 U.S. House districts, or about 34%, that are considered majority minority. Now there are 27 Black women in the lower chamber and 2 in the upper chamber. Today, this is basically the protections for those districts are eliminated. And already Texas and Virginia, even since yesterday's news, they went ahead today and eliminated their only Black majority districts. Their legislatures just did it. They didn't have to have an election or anything. And then Alabama got the injunction from the Supreme Court that I believe John touched on, which is that they ended the order requiring the two Black majority districts And so they've upended the primary elections are next week, and they are not going to, uh, the new District 2 of Mobile will not be represented on the ballot. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. That's how desperate they were, how eager they were for this to occur. So, um, anti-Black racism and the economic benefits to whites underlies the whole thing. It underlies the states' rights arguments. It's the Civil War that never ended. It's the Southern Compromise that we do need to compromise. I mean, I certainly agree with John in terms of activist groups, but I'm really thinking about how we really need to change the culture, um, deeply, deeply change the culture in this country. And I think it's going to be very difficult. The digital age has created opportunities for greater cross-fertilization meeting, but it also has created digital silos where there are many people, and I know because I'm one of those people that's involved with a lot of different subgroups here, I know that they literally don't know each other exists. Um, Raise your hand if you know there's a group called Wilder that is diverse women trying to get other diverse women elected in Santa Cruz County. Yay. Okay. We have a few. Um, there are so many people doing great work, but it's not spreading out to the culture. So for myself, I feel that I'm not sure how people will become aware of each other and develop the kind of sense of fellow feeling, siblinghood. We're all in this together to the larger culture. It may take the people being more squeezed than they are. When it hits people personally, maybe they will start more to see how racism impacts them. But I'm reminded that Justice William O. Douglas once admitted that at the Supreme Court where I work, 90% of the decisions are made on feelings and 10% is on the justifying the feelings. So the current court feels threatened by anti-racism work. They feel threatened by non-white people who want to have power, who want to have economic, social power. And fear is their reaction, and the law is their cudgel at the moment. Um, I think many of us want to blame MAGA and President Trump, but I'm more concerned about the underlying conditions that allowed MAGA and Trump to rise up. They are very serious upwelling of this kind of cancer that has infected democracy. And I know last summer, almost to the day, I was sitting here giving a doom and gloom about how bad things were going to be, and they've actually been worse than I expected. Um, However, on that note, uh, one of the great spiritual teachers that I admire, Thich Nhat Hanh, often shared a powerful story about Vietnamese boat people during the refugee crisis. And he explained that if everyone on a crowded, storm-tossed boat panicked, everyone would perish. But if even one person stayed calm, they would all reach the store. He could calm the other people and they would all reach the shore safely. So as an elder at this moment in time, my plan is to stay as calm as I can and to support people who are out there rowing us to the other shore. Thank you.
And may I add something really quickly, just by
Sure.
way of thinking about what you just said? I mean, I agree with everything you just said. Um, I was invited last year to speak to a group of seventh and eighth graders in Watsonville, a school in
Mhm.
Watsonville, by the teacher Lisa Fowler, who was doing a unit on the civil rights movement, the history of it. And I haven't spoken to a group of seventh and eighth graders in a long time, so I had no idea how that was going to go. They were amazing. They were totally enthusiastic about the subject. They were really eager to find out more, to hear more. And at the end of it, many of them said, when we get to high school, we're going to start a social justice group. Uh, and I was thinking about the uh, that hopefulness of theirs, and I had described a lot of things that weren't that were about the harsh truths of setbacks and defeats, but they had a real eagerness to do right in the world and be compassionate. Now that doesn't solve the problem you're talking about, Maria, but I think it's part of the solution that a group of young people had that position already in place, and they loved hearing support for it. So the more we can, I mean, of course, they're going after, the very people who are going after, have gone after the Voting Rights Act, have gone after the schools as well, and making that difficult in terms of what books are available, all of that. So it's part of a totalitarian kind of racism and fascism, really, a response to previous successes. But there are those students in those seventh and eighth grade classes in Watsonville, right? So there are other Watsonvilles, there are other seventh and eighth grade classes, other people, young people. Uh, and so I'm, let's see, we need to work, find them wherever they
John,
are, find them and work with them.
wait, John. I go to Watsonville for hope. Those kids are being raised by people who are on the way up
Yeah.
and are already on the way up. I am talking about the American electorate, not, you know.
Oh yeah, no,
Yes,
I
I
understand.
speak with students all the time, and they're completely optimistic. I'm speaking of the electorate, and I would like to respectfully turn this back over to Elaine, who we sort of uh, anyway, and allow time. I don't know what time it is, but we know allow some time for
Sure.
questions.
Mhm. Well, thank you both for your presentations. I really appreciate that. I I do still want to ask some questions because I think it warrants the people that are here in the room right now to be able to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because something you said, Maria, about the need to spread the culture, and you use words like silo and stuff. There's a question I've been sitting with for the last couple of weeks, so I'm just going to spill the beans. So when this all came down a couple of weeks ago, I have been feeling like alone in this whole world in this county. And I was surprised, maybe not, but there was something that was sitting with me that just didn't feel good, that nobody was talking about this. That it wasn't a big deal.
Mhm.
And for someone who looks like me, being African American, this hit hard. 2 weeks ago, it hit hard, right? Because every day you're feeling like you're getting stripped of something, right? Whether it's locally or globally. And I was like, well, where are our allies, right? Why are we not in the streets, protesting about this, which is something that's so incredibly huge for me, right? But when do we stop having to carry the burden all by ourselves? Because if it wasn't for the 44,000 Black women that formed in 2020, and then when Kamala jumped in, it started like 20,000. When Kamala jumped in to run for president, it was 44,000. If it wasn't for me attending that group twice a month, I'd be a mess. Because in that group, a lot of those women you talked about that are in those seats, back in Alabama and Mississippi and all that, they're on those calls and they're telling us how hard it is, but they're not giving up. They're telling us what they're trying to do, and they're leaning into their ancestors to be able to just to get up in the morning. And so my question to you both is, where is the help? Who besides me leaning into you, Maria and John and David Anthony, who else do we get to lean into? Who else is feeling this besides me? Does it make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Because I'm like, I wasn't sure if I was even going to ask it or not because I don't want people to take it wrong. But I just, it just felt like, and it still feels like just another day has passed. And it's really, it saddens me that we've gotten to that place where this is just another thing. Because I saw something on Facebook that really felt that twinge in my heart. And right before I got on this call, and someone said, why are we not protesting what the Supreme Court just tried to do with the Voting Rights Act? And I was like, well, somebody had the courage to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if that was a question or, but yeah, but so I would like your help with that. Thank you.
People are protesting in Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my friends just texted me right before I got on to say that she was driving home and she went through the wealthiest neighborhood in Mobile, and someone had put up a quote, "We are the beloved community." So in areas where there's a number of people, and Jealous, would you mind saying a few words, because you have led the fight for racial justice also in a majority white community. Are you able to say anything at this time, or?
Yes, can you hear me? This is like, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. Just speak
Okay.
up a little bit.
Oh, Elaine, your words got to my heart. Because I live in Pacific Grove. I've lived here for 50 years. I helped to desegregate a school in Baltimore, Maryland. Okay, wasn't able to vote until I was 25. I have a lot of history connected with this. I went to Martin Luther King's first march, which was years before the one that's so famous. And my husband is white, so I'm in an interracial marriage. I'm also in an interracial friendship group here. My experience with white people, white friends, white allies even, is that at the moment, is that they are tongue-tied. Okay. They are, it takes me bringing up the subject to have their mouths open. But they open. And it's not like they don't know what's going on, and it's not like they're not upset about it, or it's just that for some reason there's this silence thing that's very hard for them to break. And it's like they have to be invited. You have to make a statement about, how this is impacting me, and then their mouths start opening. When I was maybe years ago, before I wrote Combined Destinies, which is an anthology of white people, I was at a dinner party that was hosted by a woman I did not know. And my husband and I were invited. There were probably 18 people there at this gigantic table. And somebody said, "Anne, what are you doing now that you've retired?" And my husband said, "She's writing a book." And somebody said, "What is it about?" And I said what it was about. And then everybody started talking about racism. I was the only person of color at the table. Okay. I'm sharing this because I want you to know that silence doesn't always mean nothing's going on in hearts and minds. We have been, I think white people in this culture have been trained, maybe all the way back to people who were murdered because of being allies in the Deep South, to be silent. And it's very painful. It's very painful to be in that midst and not have anybody say something. But I'm talking because I want to encourage you to start asking people directly. Does this mean anything to you? You know, that question. What do you think about this horrendous thing with the Supreme Court? I mean, I don't want you to stay isolated, I guess. And I think it's terrible that we have to be the ones always to unlock the mouths. But we do. And when that happens, we know that we're not by ourselves, and that's really, really more important. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would love to get to know you.
It's very, very difficult, honey.
I would absolutely love to talk to you.
Well, you
You just gave me a lot.
call me anytime, come visit.
Thank you.
I've been working with Pacific Grove Unified School District, trying to help them deal with racist bullying, okay?
Yeah.
Last workshops tomorrow. I said, no, I will not. I'm done. Okay, 8 to 5, I'm done. I'm not doing this next year. So I'll have all this time, right? So feel free to
I'll give you each other's
yeah.
info.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Ann. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Ann.
Made all the
Yeah,
difference.
thank you, Ann. That was wonderful.
I'm going to encourage you guys to speak also to Latinos when you see them working, to ask, how are you? To speak, to just say something. And you don't have to be introduced in order to care about people. People don't know that you care about them unless you say you care about them in some way. All right, it's easy. Okay, I'm hugging the woman who now comes to help me with my housework because I need help with it now. And she just falls into my arms. People need you.
I will say that a big problem that good-hearted white people have is that we're afraid to make a mistake.
Yep.
Oh my God, we will say the wrong thing. Like we want to say something.
You guys have been trained.
Oh no, the brain goes in instead of just coming with, you know, the feelings and just say, I am upset about what happened in Alabama. You know, how's it for you? And
yeah, it matters.
That simple.
It matters. I got an email from Bettina after you know, one of my closest friends, longest term friends, just saying, I'm thinking about you, you know, it matters. Yeah. Say a lot, just anything.
Yes. It's that part right there.
Yeah.
That part right there, Ann. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to open it up. Anybody want to ask questions to our two amazing speakers? Don't be shy. Good, Don.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really good. I had a question. I'm an Arab American and I'm interracial too. My mother's from North Africa and my dad's from Missouri, which is a weird mix. Crazy Thanksgiving dinners, but I've been involved with the Middle Eastern stuff for a long time. I go to the Middle East, and one of the things I run across is the normalization of genocide. And I'm not saying that it's almost like it's so normal that it's happening that the public almost forgets about it. It's almost like something that's, well, it's been going on for so long. Do you think what's going on now here in America, that just everything's kind of backsliding? Do you think that's what's going on with society? It's been going on for so long that people just don't seem to care anymore, and it's almost like you have to keep bringing it up and talking about it. I mean, Rabbi Paula and I become friends over the years just by just leaning into each other. It just because she's on the other side of the Jordan, and it's like it's nice to have somebody that's opposite sides, but we both have the same goal. Just open dialogue. And I'm afraid that normalizing genocide it could happen here in America. That we just so much has happened that people just don't care anymore. Do you think that might where we're heading, or maybe that's why people are so quiet about what's going on?
I personally think that a lot of people aren't informed. I talk to my neighbors. They do not watch any television. They do not listen to any radio. They do not follow any mainstream podcasters. They are focused on their jobs, their food, shelter, families, and their extracurriculars. The price of gas might affect them, but they don't even track news. And I speak with people in all kinds of different socioeconomic groups, and unless it's something that's hitting their group, um, we don't have the Douglas Brinkley or whoever we had before, just the disparate sources of information. So I do think that there's information gap, and that's why people like Kamala Harris, who were so profoundly effective at galvanizing millions of people. I mean, she actually had more Democrats voted. I mean, it was just like a huge turnout, and the biggest short-term fundraising in election history, because she could talk to ordinary people. She could talk about the table issues. She was not free to talk about the war, which she would have loved to talk about, but she was still the sitting vice president. Um, so I think there's a gap in terms of who gets information, and then for people who do get information, it's an overload. Yeah, I think that they turn off the overload, and then the Trump administration has made, serious efforts to normalize their bizarre behavior. Sometimes I feel hopeful that they've gone so far with the vile things and the vulgar things and the crime and the self-dealing that, that it's going to be a bridge too far and a larger majority of people will rebel. At least that's my view. John, what do you think?
Well, yeah, they have a very long bridge apparently because they just keep doing they keep doing the same stuff and worse and worse. I mean, it's gotten much worse than anything I had anticipated. That's for sure. I think that also, and I think uh, Paula, that you'll recognize what I'm saying, is that the immediate thing I thought of was, of course, in this case, history, the Reconstruction period, the crushing of Reconstruction, the removal of Black people who had been elected. So this was not like, oh, for the first time we're being pushed back. It was a repeat. It is a repeat. And so I think that's another thing that is hard for some people to grasp is and Don, I think what you just said, speaks to this as well, is the continuity of racism and oppression and the way in which it is when people who want to do that kind of activity in the world have a chance, they will come back and they have come back. Uh, but there's a history to it. I mean, that's what I feel. I mean, my father's family's from Alabama. Right after the Civil War, they created a school for Black teachers called Lincoln Normal School in Marion, Alabama. Coretta Scott, before she was Coretta Scott King, went to that school much later, of course. but uh, they had to deal with all that so-called post-Reconstruction, which is a very polite way of putting saying counter-revolution uh, history uh, into their lives. And so I think it's hard for, given that we also live in a very non-historical society, that doesn't really deal with history very well. I think that's also part of the problem. But all the more reason for talking to those seventh and eighth graders. All the more reason for working, I think, with education as much as possible, like Anne is doing. Uh, you know, um, I think we need to not only speak to what we feel, but also inform about the historical patterns that different groups have had to face over many centuries.
Right.
I think
We have
about
we
the
have
indigenous population of the United States
we
that
have time for
that's the other side of my family, my mother's side of the family, who were basically almost, we weren't completely wiped out, but for century I said to someone, people talk about the post-apocalyptic. We, the indigenous part of the population, have been living in the apocalyptic for 500 years plus. And so there's a lot of history that needs to be brought to the surface. And I think if people hear that, then the way we feel, the way we're talking about now, makes a heck of a lot more sense. I mean, not that it doesn't make sense already, but it's not just something in the present. It's something that has been going on in the past over and over, to go back to Don's points.
Yeah. We have
Thank you.
two more people, and I'm wondering if it would work
Yeah.
if you both asked your questions and then we could answer them.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
See what they are. Whoops, we just lost one of them.
Yeah. One, just
There you
first,
are.
just thank you to everybody for bringing us all together and comments. It's kind of part comment, part question. It's to go off of Elaine and I've already missed the woman who responds, Miss Ann, your response about us as a Black person having to be the one to start the conversation and kind of that weight and responsibility and carrying that weight for so long and how people become exhausted. Um, and then here's my question, right? And it kind of goes to what everybody was, this most recent comments were about our strategies for counteracting the social media mechanism that is really, I think, is impacting younger generations like our millennials, Zers, and alphas, and how that perpetual it's an addiction that our young folks are dealing with, and even adults are dealing with, and that steady stream of information that is coming, that is kind of it's continuing it continues to perpetuate stereotypes or conversations. And one that really popped up for me as Elaine and Anne were speaking was the counter conversation that I've seen take hold in social media, as well as the thoughts that my students have shared with me, which is, why is the burden mine? I'm exhausted of starting the conversation. I will not do that anymore.
Right.
It is up to white people to start this conversation and talks to them. And so I can't say that they're wrong. And at the same time, if we're not the ones who are starting it, the things that we are talking about people not feeling safe enough to speak up, it takes a Dawn starting the conversation. It takes a Paula or an Elaine. It takes us starting the conversation before others feel open enough to start talking to each other. And would that conversation even happen if none of us were in the room? And so it's one of those things of like, how do we counter, or if anybody's thought about any strategies of this enormous mechanism of social media, corporate media, really continuing to perpetuate these newer falsehoods of how we engage with each other as human beings. Because at the end of the day, you're my neighbor, I'm your neighbor. I should feel like I can speak to you, right? And I should be able to just say, hey, what just happened with the Supreme Court the other day? This is some bullshit, right? Excuse my language, but I'm just going to say it. I should be able to speak openly and honestly, and we should be able to talk about it. And but I will tell you that I even allowed those messages to kind of come into my mind, like, why is it my job? Why should I be the one? And you have generations of young people who now really believe that, and it is constantly being reinforced. So, has anybody experienced that? Does anybody have any suggestions? Because, like you said, Mr. John Brown, this has been going on for centuries. This is not new, but we do have this newer mechanism of TV, social media, corporate media at a larger scale that we are receiving messages at a rate and we are consuming messages at a rate that we didn't normally have before. And so I don't know how much of that is really transforming or the way that we think, process, and feel about ourselves and each other. So I don't know if that made any sense, but if anybody has any comments or wants to respond.
I want to offer something, Courtney, just letting you know that I think six, my husband, one of them, six white people in Monterey got together and formed an organization called Whites for Racial Equity. Okay, this happened. All of them contributed to an anthology that I did. And they got together and they created this organization. They have a wonderful newsletter that goes out regularly that talks about, that gives you information about anything that's happening with any group of color, anywhere, it seems, but mostly and locally. And they also hold meetings for the general public, white people, because only it's like I can't go because they believe that it's white people's job to end racism. That if
I agree.
color could have done it, we would have done it.
Yeah, fully agree.
Go right, and that white people need to feel safe in talking about their realities, their feelings, their fears, their distress, whatever, in order to try to make change. And I think it's been very effective in a lot of ways. They have a committee that works very closely together to orchestrate meetings, but the meetings are open to the community, open to the white community. And white people come and there have been many, many allies coming out of that effort. Many people that are showing up at rallies and doing things that they never did before. So I just want to let you know that that's happening over here, and that's an idea of something that could be happening in other places.
That would be great. I'm sure there are, and
I don't know.
I wonder if there is a strategy for our ability to amplify those messages and get them amplified in a social media space so that way we can impact the algorithm a little bit. So I'm sure there are people online scrolling, all they need is that one thing that pops up that says, oh, this is happening, there's this organization that's out there, and then that hopefully grants them permission to continue seeking. And again, I don't want to I know we're up on time, so if somebody else had a question, but thank you for sharing that, and maybe that's something we can continue at a different time.
Thanks,
And
Courtney.
may I just add, I think this meeting tonight is a wonderful example of putting words into action, because just the act of being together tonight is itself a step. Despite it, here we are. I know it's on Zoom, but it doesn't matter. We're together. And I do want to emphasize the importance, not only, I understand that conversations are important and dialogue is important, absolutely vital, but we have to act. We have to give form to the words. And I think the more action there is, the more that people see things happening, the more you can kind of circumvent some of the social media barriers by doing real stuff out in the real world. And to go back to Elaine's starting point about demonstrations, what we need are some demonstrations for one thing, but there's other kinds of actions as well. Um, so words and deeds are an important combination, and I don't want to lose sight of action itself being an example which people can join. I mean, I, my memory of getting involved in the civil rights movement was not so much because of what people were saying. I mean, this was before social media. Of course, we were running stuff off on mimeograph machines, and I was typing on a manual typewriter, so you have to forgive me. But it was what people were doing. And I said, wow, if they can do that, I ought to be able to go out and help them. I ought to go out and be with them. And I think what we're doing tonight is action. This is
Absolutely.
an action. And thanks to Elaine and NAACP for putting this together because uh, we are doing something that I feel I need just to see you all here, listen to you, speak with you, learn from you. And that's what we need to do is that kind of action. And it could be something done, with South County, issues in South County have to do with farm work, for example. There's lots of forms of action to bring people together. So I'm a big believer in words and deeds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope my question didn't come off that way. I
Oh no, 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 you were
totally
great. You're
understand that.
great. I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought it up.
Great,
And I'm
great.
way behind. See, I don't do social media, so I'm
No,
kind of
Okay,
behind
but a lot
because
of
of what's going on
students,
there.
a
I
lot of young
I
people have
need to
built their
go now.
relationships and friendships through social media. And so
Yeah,
how do we make those connections like in person
yeah.
and then take it to the streets? So, okay, sorry, Miss Maria.
Thank,
No,
okay,
no,
so in the interest
those
of time, I just, Kaki's
late,
been waiting, so let's,
late
Kaki, then we'll
question.
close up.
I need to go, which is why I'm going late.
Okay.
So I have one thing to say. It's the same thing I said when I walked door to door on those Alabama roads is educate yourself, register and vote. And I know our election right now in California and our gerrymandering, I mean, I had to hold my nose, but I'm just telling you, if you want to protect any remaining shred of our federal funding and create a possible platform for pushing back, we need to just vote the relatively progressive ticket that happens
Mhm.
to be the mainstream party. Um, so I'm just encouraging people, just pick one of the top two, whether you like them or not. It's not about personality, it's about policy. Please, please vote. And this conversation was just not intended for this group to go anywhere collectively, but to hopefully give some insights and inspiration and some consolation. So we,
Yeah,
you know,
we all need that.
we feel the pain that everybody who cares about voting rights is feeling. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Kaki, we'll go with you and then we'll close out. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no, no worries. I mean, I kind of think that what I was going to say has actually been talked about. I was wanting to respond to what you said, Elaine, about, why aren't white people, why aren't allies speaking up? Like, okay, the people who never read the newspaper and maybe don't care, or have other things that are really important to them. But why aren't allies speaking up? And, as one of those people, I gotta say, I'm really confused about what one can do about Supreme Court rulings, and this has been a challenge for me all the way through this administration as the Supreme Court just, does whatever Trump tells them to do. Um, so I'm going out of here going, okay, I need to really learn, like, is there a way to overrule all, not just this, but all the other horrible things? And I think for myself, and I can't speak for other white allies, but I've just been in such shock that it has been hard to think about what to say, you know. Um, so I'm glad to be here and get inspired to do something more.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening. Thank you for this rich conversation. Thank you again, Dr. Childs and Maria.
Yeah,
I
thanks
really,
to
really
everyone.
appreciate you. Yes, it's very important. Nice seeing old friends and meeting new friends here this evening. Let's continue to support each other, talk to each other. But as Maria said, and I told all my friends, nobody gets to sit this June 2nd out. Everybody must show up at the polls. No excuses.
Right.
Okay? Deal?
Other Richardson.
It's a deal.
It's a deal.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Deal.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank you,
blessed evening.
everyone.
Okay. Take care.
Take
Thank
good
you,
care.
Elaine.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you,
Thank you.
Elaine.
Thank you all.
To vote because we need a Democrat more than we need individual choices.
Mhm.
So Heather Cox Richardson just suggested waiting until you know who the leading Democrat is.
Mhm.
Vote for that person, whether you want that person or not, because
Yes.
first we need to get away from MAGA.
Yes.
And we can clean up whatever mess the Democrat makes, after getting elected. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Ann.
I-